Thank you very much. If you're just joining us today, I'm Sharie Manon for ICare4Autism. We have Dr. Stephen Shore here today, and we're going to be talking about employing autistics in the workforce. And this is a hot topic, and Dr. Shore, you know a few things about this, so why don't you talk to us about, give us a little bit of history about who you are, what you do for not only for yourself but for ICare4Autism, and then let's just get right into it and talk about the workforce.
Oh, certainly, yeah. So I was, after 18 months of typical development, I was struck by what I call the autism bomb, where I lost functional communication, had meltdowns, and in short became a very autistic little kid. There was so little known about autism in those days. It took my parents a year to find a place for diagnosis. Finally, they did at age 2.5, and fortunately, they refuted the professional's recommendations for institutionalization and convinced the school to take me in about a year. So it was during that year that my parents implemented what we would today refer to as an intensive home-based early intervention program. I think the important thing to keep in mind is that my parents figured out what they needed to do in order to connect to me.
Right.
And in today's terms, that would be, we think of that as matching the technique or the approach to the needs of the child. And that's what they did, and this was all at a time when all of this terminology didn't exist. It was just parents doing what parents felt they needed to do. I was also started developing my interests. So, for example, at age 4, my parents found me in the kitchen one day with a kitchen knife, disassembling a watch, taking apart the hands, the gears, everything, and playing with them, and then putting them all back together again. The watch still worked, and there weren't any pieces left over.
That's wonderful.
So incredible fine motor control to take apart a watch. That even at such a young age, you can take a look at interests, you can look at strengths of an individual with autism, and start thinking about how they might be shaped towards something that is employable later on, or an area of study. And elementary school was a social and academic catastrophe. Teachers didn't know how to reach me. And I also didn't know how to get along with my classmates in a way that they could understand or appreciate. By the time middle school rolled around, I figured out what school was all about, what teachers expected from me so I could do the work. And I also started to engage in my special interests. So that's the silver lining to middle and high school.
Right.
Interests. And in my case, music being an interest, I joined the band. Now I had a structured activity in which to mediate my interactions with others. Those of us on the spectrum will be much more successful in gatherings that are activity-based,
Right.
usually on a special interest. Yeah, I got better in middle and high school because now I know what teachers wanted. It was always seemed to be a mystery as to try to figure out what the teacher wanted.
Right.
So I think some additional guidance, perhaps from a paraprofessional, perhaps from an educator who knew about special education, that would have been helpful in those days. Bicycles had become an interest of mine, so I let it be known that I could fix bicycles, and I would fix bicycles for people and earn more money doing that. By the time high school rolled around, I had found a job as a bicycle mechanic.
Did you prepare any differently than a typical high school student going into a higher education setting would go?
Well, probably most things were the same, but my parents did implement, again, in today's terminology, it would be called a transition plan to college. And I remember in high school, sometimes my parents would say, take a few days off of school, get on the bus, and go visit your sister at college, which was about 90 miles away. So I would go out there, and I'd hang out in her dorm room and for a few days and enjoy the classes she was going to and all of her friends. And that was very enjoyable. And it also gave me an idea of what college was like, which, that made me realize this was something I wanted to do.
Right.
Because courses were interesting and there weren't any bullies. Because by the time you get to college, classmates are more interested in who you are as opposed to how much you like somebody else. My advice would be to see what interests that person with the individual on the autism spectrum, How would they spend most of their time if you would let them do it? And that leads to areas of interest and strengths. You may just want to ask that individual what could be helpful to you. So many of us will be able to tell you directly. Get right to talking about the job whenever possible, and because all of the social chit-chat and all of the hidden curriculum around the interview tends to be the most difficult thing for people with autism to do. Do you tell somebody that you have autism or not? And I think to answer that question, we really need to examine, does the effect of autism significantly impact, in this case, the employment situation? And if there is, then it's time to think about how we are going to disclose to the employer. Here at ICare4Autism, we've got some exciting plans in the works for promoting success in employment for people on the autism spectrum.